Welcome to your mind.
Hello, and welcome to the Haunted Mansion. I'm Dr. Furr. I am a clinical psychologist, and I am here to discuss a psychoanalytic point of view of The Haunted Mansion by Disney 2023. And I took some notes here.
Allow me to interrupt. Do you know what is truly scary, Dr. Furr?
And let's get right on into it. This is a psychoanalytic view, meaning I'm going to look at the Haunted Mansion from a psychological point of view, from the point of view of an analyst, and from the point of view of somebody who's going through trauma. And, the Haunted Mansion is you and your mind. It is you and your mind, and you have painful memories and you have traumas. And this video and that movie can help you become aware of how to address those things. I'm a clinical psychologist. I work for the VA. I've been well trained in trauma, PTSD, which is a pretty strong form of trauma. But this applies to everyday life and everything that haunts you in your mind. Because to come right down to it, the Haunted Mansion is a house, and the house has many rooms. You will see that in the on the Disney ride, which the movie is basically loosely based upon, there's this hall that extends down to infinity with a candlelight coming towards you. And I can't quite make out from memory and the videos whether or not the things lining the wall are portraits, would represent memories, or if they're doors that lead to rooms full of memories, and the candle is coming down at you, illuminating all of these, and a ghost is holding them, and it's kind of a beware of what you're looking at, and the ghosts represent various experiences, but mostly traumatic memories. So some spoiler alerts. There might be spoilers, because at the end you see the resolution of trauma. It is Disney after all. It's PG-13. But why don't we get down to it? The Haunted Mansion. I think Walt Disney visited a house in San Jose, California, to get some inspiration, and he had Imagineers, the first Imagineers. And if somebody asked me, like, what other job would you like? And I think it would be to be an Imagineer or an archaeologist, but to uncover the cool stuff. And Freud and me kind of look at that way, and Disney has a long tradition of looking at haunted things. Like, if you see some of the earliest cartoons, there's like these skeleton ghosts like roaming around a graveyard, and there's a graveyard at the Haunted Mansion, and it's a lot of fun. But so the mansion, which represents the mind, right, is a collection full of experiences. And what happens is, this woman, played by Rosario Dawson, who I got to see on Conan O'Brien years ago, had a little crush on her. She just exudes talent, and she was Ahsoka Tano, and she's just so cool, but she moves in there with her son to make a bed and breakfast. And the reason why she's moving there is because her husband died. And so there's two losses already, right? So you've got the loss of the husband, and you've got the boy, her little boy, who's kind of like a nerdy kid, kind of affected by all the changes and the traumas in his life. And they move into the Haunted Mansion, this beautiful mansion in New Orleans. And New Orleans is known for its wonderful food and creepy graveyards and cool houses and stuff like that, and ghostly stuff. So it's perfect, right? And so they move in there, and pretty soon they realize that this place is haunted. And I've got this really wonderful poem. I put it on the short. I read some juicy lines from the poem from 1896. It was published, but the guy who wrote it, I believe his name is Thomas Hood. It's called The Haunted House. He died in 1845, so I guess it was posthumously, published. And it's pretty cool, and it acknowledges that these are houses of pain, the haunted mansion. So your mind is the haunted mansion, and she moves into the haunted mansion, and everybody has their spirit ghosts, their demons, their memories that torment them to the day. And so the ghosts are there, and the ghosts represent traumatic memories and events, right? Especially around death and human suffering. And so the head ghost, the one that's really the big problem there, is named Alistair Crump. And I showed you a little video, a little scene from the YouTube they have on there. So it's from another YouTube. Thank you, whoever did that. It's on the video. You can see it. And the ghost won't let him leave. And the first ghost I think that they really encounter is this ghost in a suit of armor, which is a wonderful metaphor for protecting yourself, right? And it turns out all these ghosts are afraid, and they want to leave the house. They want to escape this mind, this experience of being in the haunted mansion. And the head ghost can't leave either, Alistair Crump. And I think the plot line is that he wants to collect 1,000 souls by the full moon, and if he can, then he can go out there and spread his misery to others, because people experience their traumatic memories as others with others. And if I had to be psychoanalytic about it, I think the primary defense, so we have pain in life. Remember that pain in life is inevitable. You're going to have pain in life. And many of you watching this are going to have death and traumas and all sorts of things that have happened to you. I won't enumerate all of them now because you know what they are. And there can be interpersonal traumas too. I tend to be pretty tough because I tend to use this DSM to talk about trauma. This is the Diagnostic Psychiatric Manual. I'm pretty tough about it because I stick to those criteria, but there's also other kinds of traumas too. They're interpersonal traumas and social traumas they're not physical injuries or threat to death, but nevertheless are extremely upsetting. Now, keep in mind that prisoners, hardened prisoners in prison, the last thing they want is to be stuck into solitary, because it confines them from human connection. And these are hardcore guys. If you get tossed into the box, right, then it's a painful experience. And the head ghost experienced loss too. Alistair, when he was a little boy, his mother died. And being a little boy, of course, that's going to be crushing. And so he turned to the father, right? And I'm going to put a quote in here from Freud about there's nothing more important than a supportive father. But the father doesn't comfort him. The father doesn't help him. As a matter of fact, the father torments him and traumatizes him. And the father's this like elite guy. And then he, speaking about the outcast, he invites all the social elites back in the 1800s in New Orleans to come over, and they all shun him. They all make fun of him for his pain, and eventually he's kicked out. And then the father, who's this terrible man but puts on these airs of great parties, Alistair returns and he finds out that his father mysteriously died. Now, whether or not it was the other socialites or whether it was Alistair that killed him, I'm not clear. But the father died, And Alistair took over the house, and he identified with that aggressive father person. The defense is called identifying with the aggressor. Now, you will see that sometimes people, we have to attach to our parents, we have to attach to all of them, and sometimes they're lost, and we have to deal with the loss. But we also have to attach to our caregivers, and even if they're cruel people, we still have to attach to them. And Alistair, rather than responding to his pain in a constructive manner, he became obsessed with the occult and demons and spirits and stuff like that. And he wanted to share his misery with others, and he moved in there and he did the same thing. He put on the nice parties and he impressed everyone, but he was a cruel and sadistic, masochistic, sadistic person. And he would abuse his staff and anyone around him that he could abuse. And eventually they killed him. I think they cut his head off because he was just so abusive. And I'm not saying that's adaptive either. There's a way, but he vows revenge from the grave. He's going to come back and he's going to torture more people. And he starts collecting souls and tormenting them for hundreds of years in the haunted mansion because nobody can escape. Just like you cannot escape your mind, right? And there's no way out of it. You're in the haunted mansion, and will it stay a haunted mansion? Well, that's up to you, and that's my profession, funny therapy, right? I've dealt with trauma, and trauma is actually pretty easy to deal with on a brutal level, like muggings and car accidents and combat. But the interpersonal stuff, the traumas of growing up, the traumas from our caregivers, the trauma of being outcast from society, it's a whole lot harder to get to. And so the primary defense in here is identifying with the aggressor. And so Crump wants to not only torture all the 999 souls he has, he wants to terrify the people that come into there. And then when they try to leave, he won't let them leave because you can't leave your own house, right? Your head, right? And so the Rosario Dawson character and her son come in, and they try to leave right away, but if they're eventually they won't let them leave, and they even become hitchhikers. So if you go there and you leave, they will follow you. And it's really great because the guy who's this astrophysicist has this camera. They hire him to try and take pictures and of the ghost. And he goes there and he's like, I don't believe in ghosts, stuff like that. And then he goes home, and the mariner, which is a really nice metaphor again of the mariner, and you can see them in the haunted houses and a couple of the Disneylands, the portrait of the mariner, the seaman, who got himself into some trouble, and then he wound up getting trapped into the haunted mansion himself because he did some terrible things, and it haunts him, right? And so the guy with the camera goes back home, and when he opens the door, there's this ocean there because the mariner is like the seafarer. And the mariner represents somebody who wants to get away, who wants to like go live life, to do what he was intended to do. And spoiler alert, at the end, see what happens, right? And so the mariner is a hitchhiker and he has to come back to the haunted mansion because there's no escaping the mind. There's no escaping the haunted mansion and the traumas that everybody shares there, right? And each ghost represents a trauma or a bad memory, or I don't want to say a bad memory, a painful memory. If we call them bad memories, then we want to escape them. And as we know, you can't do it. The ocean also represents how overwhelming the trauma is, because when you open the door and there's this ocean, flying there, it's not a calm ocean. This is not Cancun we're talking about. We're talking about a rough sea. Towards the end, I will go into a really kind of cool more like detailed psychoanalysis for all the armchair psychologists out there, to all the Freud lovers, to the psychology lovers, the therapists, the psychoanalysts, the analysts, the psychologists. You all dig this. And so, and I have a bonus like thing to show you at the end. I just got it yesterday from an auction house from Sigmund Freud. It's pretty cool, and I'll show it to you. All right. Well, anyway, so I should follow this up with PTSD and talk about how this movie kind of shows you the way out of trauma and PTSD. And let me take a look at my notes here because there's a bunch of things that I wanted to capture. So everybody's trapped in the mansion, and the goal then is to purge the evil Alistair Crump character out. Now, how do we do that? They hire a medium. Okay, so they hire the astrophysicist to take a picture of the ghosts, and they hire a medium who is a lot like Freud, who considered himself an archaeologist, digging into the unconscious, uncovering these old things that happened. And the medium is the one that can communicate with the spirits, the one who can make contact with the ghosts, the ones who can make contact with the spirits that are haunting the mansion, right? So the mansion is your mind, the ghosts are the memories, the medium is the therapist who helps guide you, because you can't tell people what to do, and you can't tell the ghosts what to do, but you can make contact with them. And when you do that, something changes, whether it's the trauma in your mind or in the characters in the movie with the ghost and the medium. She doubts herself, and the little boy's, he's all messed up from all the traumas and moving and stuff like that. And the Rosario Dawson character lost her husband, and the astrophysicist with the special camera lost his wife, and Alistair suffered the most. He's the one that lost the mother. Then he was like cruelly treated by his father and all of society, kicked out, and that trauma is a lot for one person to handle. I don't care if you come from a tribe in another part of the world. Once you're kicked out, you are suffering. And the same thing happens in the animal kingdom. So at any rate, so Alistair becomes the traumatized social outcast that comes back and identifies with the aggressor. He's going to be the masochistic, sadistic evildoer now. He's going to treat everybody the way he was treated, because that's how he's going to defend himself from his pain. And does it work? No. Defenses eventually don't work down. Now, it's really interesting because the defense, there's other things, and I'll get into the Freud stuff later. But Freud looked at defense like there's a painful thought, painful memory, and then we can't handle it. So we build up defenses. And he and this other therapist named Fleece. Now, keep in mind, this is like 1897. My letter that I'll show you is from 1897. The Haunted Mansion, the Haunted House poem is from 1896. So we're talking about the same kind of times. But at this time, people didn't really... I mean, there was some other thinkers talking about the unconscious and how it influences our everydays, but not the way Freud did. And, I have a colleague who rightfully said that, it's hard to get behind Freud, but after you see this video, you'll see, like, thank you to this person who came up with this idea in this way. And he and this other analyst were visiting Nuremberg in Germany, because Freud was, he lived in Vienna. I think he was Austrian. I forget if he was German or Austrian. But, he hung around the German world, like in Switzerland and Austria and Germany and that kind of thing. And he, I think he can speak English. I heard that in his last video, I believe, is in English. And in his studio, he had a Declaration of Independence, a copy of it in there. And but he spoke to people in England. He spread everything around. and we're off better for it. So he went to Nuremberg and he saw this, like the castle walls, right? Because obviously they built the walls because of trauma, right? Like there's a reason why you build a wall around your city. And he got into it. I'll put a picture of that wall in this video, but that's the defense. That's the thing, trying to keep everything inside safe, because there's a sense of danger and trauma. But the difference is that we're not dealing with marauding clans that are outside. We're dealing with the ghosts and spirits inside that are still with us. So the idea then is to banish Alistair to the netherworld. And what's really interesting is that acceptance is the key in this movie and in trauma. That means letting go of holding on to pain, because pain in life is inevitable. Suffering is optional. And Alistair crosses that line into suffering and wants to spread it. And in the movie, he tempts the astrophysicist to give up his soul and spend his life with this woman. He's a liar, right? So he doesn't do that. He gives up. The astrophysicist accepts and lets go of the wish, the yearning that he could undo the past, which he can't unless he's in Back to the Future. He can't go back and change time. Nobody can. Hopefully someday we can. And I've got a funny story about that. I came up with an idea, and Stephen Hawking tested it. It's in my office in my New York office in the penthouse there next to my Dali, which is another cool thing I should talk about. The image of the Dali on there. It's very funny therapy. The idea is to purge the spirit in the house, but the way to purge it is to make connection to the ghost, and then to accept the pain of the loss of the wife. And so he doesn't give in to Alistair. He accepts the pain, and then he's okay, and he lets go. The ghost also tries to trick the son into being with his father again, because of the pain of the loss and the suffering and the trauma and all of that goes with it. And like that Freud quote that I put in there earlier, or I should put it in now, there's nothing better than a protective father figure to. I forget how the quote goes, but I'll put it up there. And but it's prescient, meaning seeing before. Freud really identified what that means, to have these characters in your life and how they protect you against the trauma. And I think it's Hollis, the Jungian. I'll bring up Jung later because he's mentioned in the thing that I have from Freud. Teaser for all of you nerds out there who are into that kind of stuff. I am. Jung, the Jungian analyst, I think you can see him on Huberman's podcast, talks about how the trouble with men today is there's a big question mark, whereas in our gender roles used to be hard and fast. They're different now, and we have to thank women, because now we have the option to inspect ourselves and to rely on others rather than being the bootstrapping, individual that has hardened gender roles, right? And each man has what he called, Hollis called, a mountain of anger and an ocean, or a lake of tears. And it's true. And they divorce themselves from their instincts, which I think the women find horrifying, that you would that you have to divorce yourself from your instincts and be a tough guy and go to work and provide and do all that, and your self-esteem is derived from how well you please a bunch of strangers, right? And a long time ago, the father used to be sort of like Alistair's, where You had the father nearby to teach you, but he didn't have a teacher. He had an abuser. And then when the mother went, there went the protective factors. And when he got outcast by society, all those protective factors were gone. And some of you have been outcast before, and you know the pain that I'm talking about. So the acceptance, the boy lets go of the yearning for this father that he can't have, and he doesn't give in to the temptation of the sadistic ghost that's trying to trick him. And the haunted house is full of people he tricked into staying or killing themselves and stuff like that. And so the house is full of just misery and trauma. And how do you get out of it? You accept it. And what they're trying to do is banish the bad demon, the Alistair Crump guy, to the netherworld. And the way to do that is done by an act of acceptance, of accepting where you're at and what's happening. So the movie beautifully illustrates a metaphor for the mind, for our various reactions and options when painful things happen to us, traumas that happen to us. And it takes an analyst to say, like, look, the primary defense here in the terrible ghost is safe, and how you respond to those traumas are going to change everything. And with someone with PTSD, there's like parts of the brain that are kicked in that are protective of themselves, and that's why they're jerks and they are irritable and they can't sleep and they're like always looking for danger and they're all startled and they have like these terrible dreams, like that, not terrible dreams, but repetitive dreams of the experience, and they can either dissociate or they can reenact it. And the idea is to keep them focused to the present and face that pain. And that's where I'm the medium then in the movie, and the ghosts are the traumatic memory, and the acceptance is the way out, not to banish the ghost, but to make contact with it, and then see how it tries to influence you, and choosing the option not to, and that banishes the ghost, but you can't do it directly. So acceptance, there's a sense of relief in the child. The child starts to excel socially. The mother is relieved that her son is doing better, and she can chart her new path. The mariner gets his acceptance and enjoyment in life. And at the end, you see like the ghosts who wanted to leave, now that the house is safe, the mind is well adjusted, then they have a big party and they're dancing and all the ghosts are fun to be around. And let me see what else I got here. Okay, so acceptance is the way out. And and they all live in harmony at the end, and you can see them dancing and having a good time, and the ghosts are no longer scary. And that's the funny thing about like traumatic memories, is if you make contact with them and you do it right, then these memories, they just don't bother you. And some people even write about them and profit off them, and people learn valuable lessons from them and can teach other people. So in essence, the movie is about you, the things that are haunting you in your sleep, and your attempts to escape them, and looking out for your defense, right? Like, and then the idea is to more or less wave the white flag to your ghosts, and make contact with them, and not try and run away from them, and not try to banish them, because it won't work, and you can find peace. And and I, in the end, I feel kind of sorry for Alistair, and so if I was going to do something like I would come up with a couple videos that would say
Imagine
that
as
Alice,
you,
or
I am the ghost
What
in your
Freud
mind.
now, what are you going to do with that ghost? Now, Freud, interestingly, but if Freud had the ability to live to be 200, he was born in 1856. He would change his mind. He changed his mind a great deal in his time. He started out with his practice of a talking cure. He was a medical doctor, and he he changed his mind on cocaine, which was originally used as an eye anesthetic. He had a paper called Uba Coca, like about cocaine, and they would put it in the eye because it has a numbing effect. That's why people like put cocaine in their mouth to taste it, test it to see if it has a numbing effect. But it also has the interesting numbing effect of killing pain. And he prescribed it as an antidepressant. But of course, as we know, cocaine has a boomerang effect. Yeah, when you're high, you're feeling really great and euphoric and expansive. But it also comes with like a boomerang effect, because then you have shame and humiliation from all the terrible decisions you made, and your brain chemistry. It's like you're changing the balance in there, and all of the pleasure that you experience is followed by depression and anxiety. So Freud changed his mind on that, and originally he was seeing people, and at this time in Europe and in Vienna, he was seeing people with like phantom limb syndrome, like where they said they couldn't move their arms or their hands. And I forget which way it works, but you can't just have one frozen. The whole thing has to be frozen. So he knew in his mind that there's something going on with these nerves, because he was a doctor, right? He had talked to Freud, right? And so he started thinking about this, and he started thinking about how the mind chemically works, right? And all of these patients were originally reporting being abused, mostly sexually, in this like Victorian time of extreme repression, by people that they were trusted, and that's where like like Hollis, the yearning for that teaching father, that wise man that can teach you your way. And what Freud said, the strength of having that kind of father there to like support, protect you. These are important things. And these people who were coming to Freud were either being abused by the people that, like their parents or their family members, but also people they trusted and were trusted into. And so he began to look at their symptoms and just talking to them, and he noticed that their symptoms went away. So something physiologically was changing as their minds changed, and they said it out loud to somebody else. Now, what's really cool is I have a picture of this. In 1898 or 1897, he wrote a letter to this other analyst, and he drew a crude picture of the layers of memory, right? Because in our everyday minds, we go around and we see things all the time. We think is what we see, but we're actually projecting all sorts of things from our past onto them. We're seeing everyone we meet through a dense thicket of absent others. We're viewing the world through the lens of our experiences and what our minds are telling us and our defenses. Some people are like neat freaks, and some people are like macho guys, and this is all defense, right? This is all people trying to protect themselves. And so he was seeing these people who were having bodily symptoms, and that was their defense, right? It's a very primitive defense, but it's a defense. And by talking, they were able to make contact with these traumas, and they would tell Freud about these abusers, and their symptoms would go away. So he started talking about this, and as you can imagine, it didn't go over well. So he got some pushback, and he decided to change his mind. And he said, okay, well, we're coming up with fantasies now. We're coming up with fantasies. And that they're imagining this stuff, and so we talk about it, and he made sense of that in his own way. And in that video, the picture that I show you, you'll see like Roman numerals, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and each one represents a level of memory that you have access to. So above that, you have your waking experience, and then there's like the little thing, the tallest one, where you have the most access to, and that's just stuff that bothers you, the stuff that's your day-to-day stuff. And then it gets lower and lower with each number. And then there's stuff you just don't want to think about, you don't want to talk about. And below that are like traumatic things where you really want to avoid them. And avoidance is the hallmark of anxiety, but especially PTSD. And at the bottom is the repressed. That means the unconscious. That means it's in there, but you don't have access to it, and you need the medium to make contact with the ghost, right? And it's really interesting doing the trauma work. You'll see that people come with these very, very loose memories of what happened, but the more you dig into it, the more it starts to unpack, like a suitcase. Like, all of a sudden you start to undo all of the items in the suitcase, and pretty soon all the detail gets laid out, all of the meaning. You get a picture of what that person's all about and what happened and what they're there for and what they're all about, by looking into their suitcase, by unpacking the memory, right? And that's the way out. And even though it's the scariest thing, I've had guys in my office worried that they were going to get shot again, even though they're not in war. They're in New York City. They're not in Afghanistan. There's no RPGs being shot at them or anything like that. And these different layers, and you can see his image of the mind pointing down to the different levels of access to knowledge. And that's where the work is for a psychologist, right? To get you, to guide you through it. We can't, if you shove it in their face, they're going to run. Right? And you can't intellectually explain it to them, because that won't work. You have to activate the pain, right? That's the tough way out. And if you don't deal with your pain, the pain will deal with you. And the people with PTSD, they hide out. They can't have loving feelings. They can't sleep. They abuse substances. They get themselves into all sorts of trouble because of the irritability. And the last thing they want to do is have these thoughts and memories. And it's my job to help them engage them. So if you look at that picture up on the right side, you can't see it. It says Arbeit, which means work, Arbeit. And it's a lot of work, right? And then he started to look at these things as the activity of their mind from a medical point of view. Now, today, we look at that and be like, look at he's a terrible scientist. It's the expansive work he does by thinking about things that give us this idea that there is a talking cure. Thank you. That there's different levels of awareness. Thank you. Even today, CBT, the first thing they'll do is they'll look at your automatic thoughts, which are just on the outside of consciousness, like that level 1 or level 2 kind of thing. And they'll get you to explore them. Of course, they don't want you, what they're trying to do is change your pain, which doesn't work. You have to actually experience the pain, which is where the mindfulness comes in, and the psychoanalysis comes in, and the Carl Rogers view of just being honest and like what the person's saying and calling them out on it. With unconditional positive regard. There's a YouTube of Carl Rogers on there. You should really check it out. He's amazing. Anyway, so Freud began to look at these things like that. That there's a chemical process happening in the mind when they do the psychoanalysis, and the analysis is to go in there like an archaeologist and go through these layers of consciousness. And it originally said make the conscious. That was to make unconscious conscious, and that's the cure. But later on, when he came up with this idea that people were fantasizing, then he started to look at when you're born, you're like a little ego, like a little animal thing. Then the little boys and girls and everything else in between bump into the real world, and then they get a sense of what's right and wrong. And that becomes the superego, the keeper of the rules. And you'll see OCD people are just full of this stuff. They're held to all these high standards and cleanliness and stuff like that, and which is great until you take it too far. And then there's the waking conscious part, the part that you see every day. And so he looked at like unacceptable memories and experiences as something that was too much to handle in every day. So the different layers. And I'm going to put another thing in there from modern science, because, people say, it's hard to get behind for. But I pulled out a video of the different levels of opaqueness, how much light can see through something. It looks a whole lot like that primitive sketch he did in a letter in 1897. And the letter's from 1897. My letter, by the way, I will show it to you now. I got this. This is a handwritten letter from Sigmund Freud, and it has Professor Dr. Freud here, and it has his address. The number 19. What? Bergenstrasse? I'm forgetting off. I'm embarrassed that I don't remember the name of the street right now, because it's one of those tip of the tongue phenomena. It's like on his like little thing of consciousness. It's right there on that tip of the tongue kind of thing. And anyway, I paid a lot for this. You can buy this from me if you're Christie's or the Freud Museum or something like that. To me, make an offer. I think I'm going to keep it. I really can't believe it. I haven't even looked at the other side yet, because I'm going to get special gloves and look at it that way. It's that important. That thing belongs in a museum. So anyway, yeah, look at his handwriting, right? And compare it to the video thing that I just showed you. Same handwriting and everything like that. And the idea then is that Freud thought of these like repressed memories as in there, and then there's a chemical process and a defense. Remember, the city wall is the defense, and the knight in armor is a defense, and the running away is a defense. So the fortifications give us the sense of safety, which they do to some extent. But this is a very early idea, and later on, Freud's idea of ego and superego, especially the superego, that's when the parents are internalized, and people who are too harsh on themselves, they should do what the medium does and try and exercise, because when you have these harsh caregivers that teach you too many rules and cleanliness and this and that and shoulds and make you feel guilty about everything in life, it's like they're in your head, right? And it's like an exorcism to get that one little voice out and shine a light on it. It's really hard for people to do. My dog, it had a little image of me in its head. I came home and I saw Reese's Pieces peanut butter cup wrappers everywhere, and there's one guilty looking dog with a full stomach and feeling really sick, because the dog knew it wasn't supposed to do that. I told it to, don't eat that stuff, you'll get sick. But anyway, I figured the dog suffered enough, probably won't go back to those. Anyway, so the idea then is that Freud changed his mind again, and he said that these aren't traumas, these are fantasies, and these fantasies create are expressed through they are distortions. These memories are distorted, then these trauma memories, because they're buried so deep, and when you get access to them, they're distorted, and CBT people love distortions. They could hang their hat on that, and that's what happens when you see people with traumatic memories. Like, it takes a while to get access to those distorted memories, and the meaning of life changes. Like, especially somebody with sexual trauma, they blame themselves and stuff like that, and after you get access to it, those distortions start to change, and life gets a lot better. And then, so Freud, I think it was Freud or someone else, said that these old city walls, these old defenses over time start to crumble, which they do. And instead of a memory, you have a ruin. Isn't that delightful? And the haunted house is nothing but a ruin, right? You go inside that poem. If I have the time, I'll read it, about these like tattered old banners that people used to put on, and the manners that they had, and that led to all the suffering and trauma, and the place is haunted, and so I think I've covered pretty much everything I want to about this as an analysis of the Haunted Mansion movie, and how it relates to the ideas of of of, uh, of psychoanalysis, and how we view all these things. And if you want to see something really scary, then start to look at those ghosts in your head. And when you're sitting home at night and you start to hear things that go bump in the night, and you wonder what's down that haunted hall, it's your mind. It's all in your mind. And Alistair might come up to you and say, "It's all in your mind. I am your mind." So anyway, why don't we stop here? And I wish you all good mental health. Funny therapy.